So we just got back from a 12-hour road trip. 12 hours there, we stayed a week, 12 hours back, and we drove with Eleanor in our EV. So it was the first time. I was very nervous about it. Uh, lots of learnings, I think. I mean, Eleanor did really well considering she was stuck in the car for a very long time, and we split it over 2 days. But I would say, like, with our breaks and charging, it probably, the 12-hour drive turned into about 18 hours
Oh my
altogether.
word. How many times, like, did you have to stop like every 2 hours to charge?
Yeah, so we would stop every hour and a half to 2 hours to charge and like get Eleanor out of her car seat. But I mean, overall, I would say it went really well. She definitely needed those breaks every few hours. She's very active at this point. So
Yeah.
getting confined into a seat, she would just get really irritated. She like does this thing where she like flails her arms when she gets like too frustrated. She like pushes everything off of her and she's like flailing her arms. It's really funny. But I just know when we get to that point, it's like
Yeah. We need to
she's
stop.
done.
She's done.
Yeah, and we did a bunch of stuff that kind of kept us sane. Rob and I would sit in the back seat with her if she was really fussy or if she wasn't sleeping. Usually music tends to do it, so if we're playing music, she really loves, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but we play it on Apple Music, but the Lulu Kids, she
Hmm.
really loves Johnny Johnny, Yes Papa.
Oh,
Have you heard that song?
I have not tested that
Oh
out.
my god. Every day she's like, "Papa, Papa." She just wants us to play that song. And it's like a minute. It's a very short song. I don't know how long it is. It's like a minute, minute and a half maybe. And so like we're playing it on repeat constantly. um,
Oh gosh.
we brought a bunch of toys, so she really loves like her 100 words book. She has this like little boom box that she loves. She loves her stuffed animals, so that helped. And we have those like fidget toys that you spin that you can like stick
Oh yeah.
to
Yeah.
surfaces. She really loves that too, but she like grabs onto it and like spins it.
But where did you stick it in the car? Like on the window?
We didn't. So I would just hand it to her and she's learned to like grab onto the sticky thing and like spin it with her hand.
Okay. We have we have like a mini. It's a little steering wheel with like a gauge thing and like a blinker and a horn and a
Oh,
whatever.
cute.
It's really small, but every time we get in the car, Axel has it, and he literally the entire time we're driving, he just keeps pressing the horn button or the and he says beep 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 beep. I'm like, who are we
So
beeping at?
cute. That's really cute.
But yeah, that keeps him distracted in the car.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. It was good traveling. We had one incident like the first night as we were getting to the hotel. And we got to the hotel much later. I mean, it was our first drive. We didn't know how long it was going to take, so we booked a hotel somewhere and then, we kind of got there much later than we expected. I think it was like 10 or 11 when we got there. But she just woke up like right before we got to the hotel and was like screaming, crying, which Eleanor just does not do often. And so it's always like, what's going on? Right.
Hmm.
So Rob and I tried to console her for about 2 hours, and it was like madness because we're trying to get everything out of the car into the hotel. And you know, Rob and I have to be separated because I'm taking her into the hotel first and he's still out with the car. So he doesn't know exactly what to grab. So he grabs everything, which we packed a lot. We were going to be gone for like, 8, 9 days. And we were just staying one night over in a hotel. So everything came up to our room. It was just. And then we got her to her room and she was still very hard to console. Like, I'm not exactly sure what happened. We were thinking maybe, I don't know if it was just like coincidence. She was just like super gassy and her stomach hurt because she was tooting a ton. But I didn't know if like being confined in the seat for so long and not moving, like wasn't allowing her to like release like
Mm.
gas or something. I don't know. That's just speculation, but it was very unlike her. So Rob and I didn't get to bed until like super late that night. Neither did Eleanor. So the next day's drive was a little tough, but
Oh gosh.
yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. What's going on with you?
We are in the process of potentially maybe moving. So we had the basically on the house we had the home inspection and then the well and septic inspection, and out of all of that we had to have the county inspector come out, and because I guess the county inspector tells you what needs to be done with your septic and your and how it's supposed to be placed and how everything's set up. So right now we're waiting on the report. So that happened yesterday and we're waiting for the report to come back
Mm,
today. Based on the conversations Austin had yesterday, it sounds like it was pretty good news, not any
good.
bad news.
That's
So
good.
we'll see what the report says, but I guess if that comes back good, then we'll actually be moving forward. We'll be putting our house up for sale. So I'm like thinking 10 steps ahead, like, okay, I got to do this, this, and this, and this. So I know, okay, so the house, everything crazy that's going on, and we'll see how that plays out. So there will be an update soon in the future. But I wanted to update you on the toy rotation that we're doing.
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's been working out. I don't remember how many weeks ago we started it, but
Hmm.
basically like every Sunday night before he goes to bed, we just rotate the toys and I grab a new box or a new container, and it seems to be working out well. I've had to bring out like some new toys, and what I've realized is probably easiest than having 7 containers of toys is just like one container and you fill that container with toys, and that's like
Hmm.
what you bring downstairs and the rest you can put away or store. um, because I've brought out a few, like maybe I have like an animal themed toys that week and I want to bring back out the farmhouse.
Hmm.
Um, but I usually try to put like one big item up in his playpen because of the stairs, and then I put the rest downstairs for him and Austin. So it's been actually working out really well, and it makes like thinking about toys very
Hmm.
easy. So
Yeah,
10 out of 10 recommend.
I like it. I
Yeah.
might, I might think the problem I have is storage. So I don't think I could like I don't know where I would put it to like rotate it out. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, I have that whole extra room downstairs just full of
I
bins.
know. Ugh,
So,
that's so nice.
yeah. But that I wanted to share with you. And then I know how you just said like Eleanor gets really frustrated and she like flails
Hmm.
her arms, whatever.
Hmm.
Well, Axel started doing this thing where he's frustrated and angry and he just like growls. And so like I was trying to get ready for work one morning, and my mom was going to watch him, and he's just sitting downstairs in the playpen like just growling at me because he wanted to eat. And so
Oh my gosh.
anytime we'll like bring him out, or he'll be at a restaurant, or he'll be like watching us make his food for lunch or breakfast,
Hmm.
he'll just start like growling until he gets his food.
That is so funny.
So yeah, that's what my child does. He growls.
At least they're learning, I guess, to express frustration in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Like, yes, it does frustrate me too when I'm hungry.
Yes. Same. Okay, all exciting stuff. But welcome back to the Mom Era podcast. My name is Megan.
I'm Alyssa.
So let's jump into today's
Yes.
episode. We're talking, I feel like this is a loaded topic.
Another loaded topic. All these topics are loaded.
So loaded. There's so many things that go into it. We're talking about breastfeeding, nursing, pumping, and our experiences through all
Mhm.
of that, which I think we had similar but different experiences. So it'll be kind of interesting to kind of talk through.
Yeah, and that was one thing, like breastfeeding. I did not think that that would be like, I didn't think it would be such a big part of the entire experience. Like, I
Hmm.
just thought it would just naturally work out however I thought or pictured it in my brain to work out.
Yes. Hmm.
And it was like the complete opposite. So it was just very, very interesting to see how big of a part that played in like postpartum and everything with the baby.
It's so true. And like, for me, I was so naive going into it. So I didn't do much like preparation. I didn't do much planning. I expected my body to do what it was naturally made to do with like minimal effort from me. I
Hmm.
really never considered all of the factors that affect your ability to nurse and breastfeed, like your mental health. DEMER is one. So I don't know if you've heard of it,
No, I
but
haven't.
it's like some people experience a very negative emotion like attached to breastfeeding. I think a lot of times it's associated with the letdown, but it really inhibits the ability to breastfeed. Some people can't, or they just kind of like trudge through it. I think body type was another big one, like just production level, like all of that I never really considered were factors into like my experience of breastfeeding. I just went in being like, my body will do it, right? Like I'm not worried. But I didn't know what to plan for too. And I feel like I kind of say this a lot in our podcast is you really don't know what you don't know. And this wasn't an area that I felt like I needed to like dive deeply into. I
Hmm.
know you took a class, didn't you?
Yeah, I took, I think it was like Breastfeeding 101.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the hospital that I gave birth at. So it was actually a good resource. And I'm glad that I did take it because I knew nothing about breastfeeding. And um, most of the information that they shared was very, very high level.
Mm-hmm.
And like explaining like the correct type of latch for a baby, and they had you like practice how to latch the baby and the different positions you could put the baby in to breastfeed, and then like kind of warning signs about mastitis and
Mm-hmm.
like oversupply, undersupply, when to pump, when not to pump. Like that was just, it was just a very, very high level like booklet that I
Mm-hmm.
went home with and I shared it
Yeah.
with you, Megan.
Yes.
And yeah, it was, I felt like, okay, I know all this extra information, like I'm super prepared, and there's a lot more to it.
There's so much more to it. Yeah. Yeah. I read what you provided me, and I was like, some of the stuff you said, I was like, oh, really? And then I think I also read like a blurb in the or the whole section. I don't know, it might be like 5 to 10 pages in my baby book. But again, I was just like, oh, it'll all work out.
Yeah. Part of our experience, I think, and just looking back at it now, it's been a year, I just saw my sister give birth, things like that. Like, um, and I think part of the induction experience plays a
Hmm.
role in it. And I'm just thinking this because one, my baby wasn't ready to come out, but he was coming out anyway, and so I was induced. And so when the baby came out, I was one, super tired, super
Yeah.
hangry, and it wasn't my first reaction or want to keep putting the baby on the
Hmm.
breast to breastfeed. And I think that that is something that I would go back and, I guess, do differently,
Hmm.
because attaching the baby to the breast every single time instead of pumping and trying to give the baby what I had, or attaching him when he was starving. And
Hmm.
I think that caused some issues like in the beginning, where if I would have been knowledgeable about that, I think that would have made me feel more comfortable with it.
I'm in the same boat. Like I really struggled with the baby blues for those first 2 weeks. And even in the hospital, we can talk about like our experience in the hospital, but my mental health during that period really affected my motivation to not even to nurse because I was really on board. I was on board. I wanted to breastfeed. I wanted to nurse. I was going to do it in whatever way worked for me. But I really struggled with the motivation because it wasn't working naturally like I expected. And so that motivation to just like keep going, keep trying was very difficult. And I really had to like force myself to keep going. And luckily, I had a very supportive system. So Rob was very supportive. He would be like, hey, have you done, have you put her on the breast today? Have you tried it? Do you want to keep going with this? He was just very supportive and helped remind me. And I also saw a lactation consultant outside of the hospital. But the turning point for me was really a breast shield, which we can talk about later, but that changed my whole experience.
Do we want to go into our experience, like kind of what happened in the hospital, and then I
Yeah,
think we can talk about the resources that helped us?
yeah, let's do it.
So initially, um, with Axel, he came out a very hangry baby. He was just like perfect and amazing, but he loved food and he wanted it now. And I think this is just what I've been thinking about recently and what's kind of concluded in my mind. It's not a medical opinion at all. Um, but I think one, because he wasn't ready to come out, his immediate reaction whenever he was hungry, he would get that through the placenta. Like he would just be,
Hmm.
I'm hungry. Okay, I'm filled up now. And so I think that was his initial reaction, like, I'm hungry. Why aren't you filling me up? And he didn't want to work for it at all. So we had tried to attach him to the breast a few times. And at that point in time in the hospital, when we were attaching him, he was like to the point where he was starving. So I had
Hmm.
used donor breast milk in the hospital, and they do have donor breast milk if you ask for it. Some hospitals are very, specific with what they do and don't give you because they want you to keep putting the baby on to keep getting the milk out and the colostrum to help your milk come in. And so we had done that every time. I had the lactation consultant come in and tell me that I should be pumping every time, like pumping every 2 hours. So even
Hmm.
if I wasn't putting him on the breast, I should be pumping. So I just remember I had my Spectra pump and I put it on and I'm like, okay, like this is like what I measured at home. Like, do you think this is right? And they're just like, yeah, it looks fine. Turn it
Hmm.
on, press the button, and that was it. Like, there was no like, okay, if you press this button, it changes the modes. If you press this button, it turns it up and down. You want to make sure you
Hmm.
have a good fit. You want to make sure it's, um, you know, some is coming out. Uh, so things like that, like where I was just like standing there with the pumps, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Hmm.
So um, then after, since I was in the hospital like 4 or 5 days, we had continued trying to latch him. I had gotten him to latch a few times, like 1 or 2 times, but again, I didn't realize that I was waiting so long until he was starving. Like I thought he was just like
Hmm.
starting to get hungry, where he was so frustrated, and he would literally just get on. He would latch on, maybe suck once, and then he would just like turn his head back and forth with his mouth open. And he had a really hard time finding it, latching to it, and so that I think was part of the main issue, that he didn't want anything to do with it.
Hmm.
Was so hungry every time, and I look back now and I'm like, it would have made my life so much easier if I would have just given him a bottle of the formula that they gave me in the hospital and then continued to like pump and get my milk to come in and try and keep latching him.
Hmm.
And I think it was so hard to have the patience with that,
Yes. Hmm.
because you're like, I just want to feed my baby. I just want my baby to be happy.
Yeah.
And you're postpartum, like a whole baby just came out of you. And
Hmm.
so that was really hard. And on the last day, my lactation consultant pretty much had come in like probably twice a day at this point, and they finally gave me the nipple shield. And they were very reluctant to give me the nipple shield because they wanted the baby to be attached to the breast, which is the best for the baby because they're getting the most flow, um,
Hmm.
and it protects your boob from getting um, like, because they're sucking directly from the nipple instead of like the
Yes.
shield.
Hmm.
So then they gave me the nipple shield and told me to only use it when I needed to, and we had gotten him to latch and things were looking good. And I was like, okay, we can go home now.
We could do this. We got this.
And we went to go get discharged, and he lost his mind again, and he would not latch, and he was crying and screaming. And I had to get like one more donor breast milk, and I got home and I was like, if this doesn't work, like when we get home, we're just going to use formula.
Hmm.
Because that
Hmm.
was the point that I was at. Like I was
Sure.
pumping, nothing was coming out, because my milk hadn't come in yet,
Hmm.
and it wasn't satisfying my baby, and all I wanted to do was satisfy my baby. So we got home, and my milk ended up coming out every time I pumped, and I like kept trying to latch him over the next like 6 weeks. He latched a few times here and there, mostly with the nipple shield, um, because I think he was so used to the bottle at this point, and liked, like, I had given him, those Advent bottles that you have to like actually suck for it to come out.
Yes.
I use them
Mm-hmm.
now, but they're the natural ones.
Mm-hmm.
I had given that to him in the beginning, and he was so irritated by it because he had to actually work to get it out. Like it wasn't just coming out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, my baby was very specific and very hangry in the beginning. Um, Ultimately, my journey just ended up with exclusively pumping,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up being an overproducer too. On top of that, and so it was just a lot, but I finished pumping at 6 months, and we transitioned to formula, and everything was perfectly fine. But that
Mm-hmm.
was my story and our journey. What about you, Megan?
Ooh-wee. Ooh-wee. So I totally agree with you about the induction piece because Eleanor also was not ready to come out. She also did come out hungry. So when I was in the surgery room, they brought her over to me and she was doing like the like lip smacking thing with her tongue, like indicating she wanted food. She was doing that immediately. It was so cute. They were like, "Oh, she's hungry," blah blah blah. So once they pulled me over to the recovery area after my C-section, the nurse and I, after a little bit of like skin to skin, started to put her on the breast. And I remember very specifically her saying that I needed to, like, they would call it the C, something with the C, but also would call it like the hamburger. So you had to like, kind of squeeze your breast in a way and put it in the baby's mouth so that they could easily get to the nipple. And it was just really hard for me to like comprehend. I think the hardest part for me in the beginning was positioning, like where to put her that was like comfortable for me to hold because I had at the time held maybe one or two other newborns that were like that little. I wasn't super comfortable with it. And this was my baby. I didn't want to like, you have to like support the
Hmm.
head so much. And I was just really nervous about positioning. So she, same as Axel, only latched a few times while we were at the hospital. Same as you, also, we saw a lactation consultant probably twice every day, and each time that they were there, I felt so confident. We would get her to latch. I'm like, oh, we get her in this spot. It's really easy. Like, this is going to be fine. The problem was I wasn't producing any milk. It took, I think, 5 to 7-ish days for my milk to like actually come in. And I can never say the word. My colostrum, how do you say that?
Colostrum. Yeah.
Colostrum was very thick. It was like honey almost.
Mm.
And so that was very difficult to feed her, but the the doctor's lactation consultant basically told us to put it on a spoon and just kind of like have her like lick it. It was interesting because she couldn't physically drink it. It was very thick. So we were also in the situation where we needed to feed our baby, but I wasn't producing milk yet to actually feed her. And so at the hospital, we ended up doing formula. And this is where we started feeding her cold formula because they just gave it to us. And then once we were like done with it, we put it in the fridge and then we like didn't have anywhere to heat it up. We probably could have, but I was like, do we just give it to her cold? And they're like, you can. I'm like, okay. Like, but they were very specific on how to feed Eleanor through a bottle. I forget what they called it
Pace
because I think,
bottle feeding.
yeah, pacing, exactly. So we had to have her kind of upright, and then we would take the bottle and also have the bottle like 90 degrees to her mouth so that she had to work for the milk or formula in the same way as she would have to on the breast, so that she didn't get complacent and was like, I only want milk coming very fast through the bottle nipple.
Like Axel.
Yeah, so luckily they told me that, and Rob and I were very, very good at doing that. I mean, we fed her that way basically the whole time I was nursing. So yeah, in the hospital, same as you, I pumped every 2 to 3 hours. I didn't bring my own pump. I was the type of person that was like, I don't want to bring too much to the hospital. And I was like reading whether to bring my pump or whether to not bring my pump. And people said, use the hospital pump. It's so much better and stronger. So I was like, okay. So I did that. And they had, I think it was size 28 flange. And I asked the lactation consultant, and I'm like, I feel like this isn't working for me. It seems too big. And she's like, well, that's the average size.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think it's the average size. I'm pretty sure I looked at that later on and it was not. I'm
Yeah.
like a 19 or something. I was not a 28. So it was so painful on top of like just priming your nipples to do that in general. It can be painful, but the fact that I was using a flange that was way too big
Hmm.
was it was very painful.
And that was what the lactation consultants kept like preaching to me, like, make sure your flange size is correct. You want your flange size to be correct. So I had even made an appointment to make sure my flange size was correct with
Mhm.
them, and we spent the whole time breastfeeding the baby, and he latched and was perfectly fine. But
Mhm.
you would think that they would be like, hey, no, you need to have the flange size. It needs to be correct so you don't hurt yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was all part of it too. And I think my downfall sometimes is that when medical professionals tell me something, I'm like, "Oh, okay. My understanding must have been wrong." You know? So then they're like, "Size 28 is fine." So even when I went home, I used that for a while until I think I had joined some breastfeeding nursing Facebook pages, and people were struggling on production, and they were kind of saying, make sure you are using the correct size. And I think you and I had also talked about it.
Hmm.
And it was then when I finally bought the correct size and was able to use it. But yeah, in the hospital it was tough. I wish I would have brought my own pump and talked to somebody there about it. Do I know if it would have been different and if they would have given me good advice? I don't know, but at least I would have like tried, because I didn't really know what I was doing with my own pump once I got home, because I used the hospital pump. I did a lot of research on it when I got home. Like I was
Yeah, you
very obsessed with pumping and
become
breastfeeding.
expert. I asked you all my questions.
Yes, I just became so obsessed at like looking up things and how to, because my problem was, you had said you became an overproducer. I was under the impression that I was an underproducer, which I was for a while, but once I saw Eleanor's pediatrician and I was telling her how much I was producing, she said that is natural. So every time I would pump, I would produce maybe 1 to 2 ounces, and in probably one closer to the beginning, and it slowly increased. And she said that is absolutely normal. And I was under the impression that it wasn't, because I was a part of these Facebook groups that were obsessed, like absolutely obsessed with the amount of production, the amount of fat in their milk, and also with feeding their freezer. And so I had a I misconstrued the whole breastfeeding experience with my production being super low, when in reality it was very normal, and I was just like contending with what people were putting out there online.
And your body was making exactly what Eleanor needed.
Yeah, I know Axel was a big milk fiend, so he drank, what, his ounces were like, what, six
It was like 5 to
ounces
6 ounces every 2
Yeah.
hours for the good
hmm
for good for 6 months.
Yeah, and Eleanor was around like, 3 ounces. She wasn't a big milk drinker. She just It never felt like she was getting enough, and it felt like we were feeding her like every 2 hours just to make sure. And sometimes she would like elongate the amount she was drinking. So if we put 3 ounces in a bottle, she wouldn't drink those 3 ounces until like it would take her like 2 hours to drink all of it, 3 hours to drink all of it. So
Yeah.
I was always really nervous about that, especially when it came to nursing.
No, I was just gonna piggyback off that where Axel
Hmm.
was drinking, 5 to 6 ounces per feed. I would get so concerned when I would get close to like not overproducing
Hmm.
because I'm like, oh, I'm always producing so much, but it was really because my baby wanted to eat so much milk all the
Right.
time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole feeding your freezer or just overproducing in general can cause a lot of issues, and the fact that it's put out there as the standard I think is really concerning because I was able to freeze some. I have the amount that I froze. It wasn't very much, maybe like 60 ounces in total.
yeah,
And we never even finished it. It like, by the time I was done breastfeeding, a lot of it was expired. We didn't really use it. I mean, I was very adamant on her using the most fresh milk or drinking from the ruba or whatever it was. So, that's going into the next experience. It definitely won't be something that I care much about, even though I did this time around and wasn't able
yeah.
to put much in the freezer.
Where I had so much in the freezer, and by the time I had stopped breastfeeding at 6 months, I had 700 ounces frozen.
Holy
And
smokes.
the problem was at that age, Axel also had started eating food and he
Hmm.
started to reject my frozen breast milk. And I was like, oh, heck no. Like, I worked so hard for this breast milk. So I had talked to my pediatrician and she gave me tips like, put that in pancakes, like make pancakes, make the frozen popsicles. Um, so I would defrost it and put like because in the morning X would drink 8 ounces, so I'd put 4 ounces of breast milk, 4 ounces of formula, so that the taste wasn't as
Hmm.
bad because I think it's high. Is it lipase or lipase?
I don't know how to say that.
But basically, it's like lipase or lipase in your breast milk, and it can make it taste disgusting. And
Hmm.
I tasted my breast milk. I don't know if you tasted yours. Did you taste yours?
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So when I tasted it after it was frozen, it tasted like straight up dish soap, like
Ooh,
disgusting.
gross.
So my pediatrician had told me to add like a drop of vanilla in it, and so I noticed that that helped. I would do
Hmm.
vanilla, and I would use the frozen breast milk specifically in the morning when Axel was starving, so he didn't really care about the taste; he just wanted to eat.
He just wanted to gulp it down. Yeah.
So
Yeah, my frozen breast milk, I didn't end up using a lot of it because to me it just took on the taste of the freezer, if that makes sense. Like it's just like a culmination of cold and the stuff you have in there. I don't know, it's very weird and I get really odd about food and things like that. So she also didn't seem
too into
to
it.
love it. No, no. And I at that point, like I had nursed and breastfed. I'll talk about the rest of my story, but I had done it until November. So she was about 10 months, but I had weaned off probably the last few weeks, cutting down a pump, but ultimately got to like 10ish months. After the hospital, though, I also saw a lactation consultant. I think we went twice, if I remember correctly. And then they would do the weighed feeds. So, like, of course, when we're there, Eleanor would latch perfectly.
Perfectly,
Hmm.
perfectly, every time.
And yeah, she would feed, and they were like, oh, she's getting X amount. It's great. And I would go home feeling great and then just could not replicate it for some reason, until a friend of mine had mentioned the nipple shield, and I used it and was able to get her to latch every time. The nipple shield was never brought up to me by any consultant. I never knew it
Mm.
existed. So then the second time I went to the lactation consultant after the hospital, I said, hey, I've been able to do this at home with the nipple shield. Like, do you have any reservations against it? And they said no. They were like, nope. If that's the way you can get it to work, that's the way you can get it to work. So, my journey with Eleanor in breastfeeding, primarily, I would do most nursing at night. I would do some during the day, but I primarily would pump during the day, nurse throughout the night. And like I said, I made it to like 10-ish months. But it was a true love hate relationship.
Yeah, like you wake up every day and you're like, I hate this. I'm done pumping today. And then the next day you're like, I could do this another 6 months.
Yes. Exactly. I felt the same exact way. Like, I so badly wanted to have my body back. But then at the same time, I felt a ton of like guilt and pressure to keep going.
And I want to say that too about you. Like, you had gone to 10 months and you were producing exactly what your baby needed, and
Mhm.
she was growing and perfect, right?
Mhm.
Um, so to me, I feel like that definitely would have been a lot harder to stop breastfeeding,
Mhm.
or pumping, because it, it was working out.
Yeah.
Where my baby, and he's just a small baby, but he is like a, you know, 1, 2, 3 percentile baby. Um, and
Mhm.
so he was getting weight, but I don't know if my milk just didn't have enough fat in it,
Mhm.
to the point where he was just drinking so much milk and not really filling up. Um, and he needed to like put on a little bit more weight. And so when I had tried the formula and I started mixing it with the breast milk, like he was thriving on it, loved it, thriving, filled up, wasn't like having issues waking up in the middle of the night. So that just worked out. And I think that made the transition, of weaning off of pumping a lot easier for me. Where if everything was perfect and going well, and he was growing to the needs that he needed to, it probably would have been a lot harder for me.
Mhm. Yeah. I did struggle with Eleanor eating just in general. And she was always in the like 5 to 7 percentile in weight, which she was following her curve
Hmm.
perfectly. So we never had any issues. Yeah, maybe I had more fatty milk than you did. I mean, I would always get like that fatty layer on top. It was never huge, but clearly with the amount she was drinking, which was much less than Axel, like she was also gaining probably at a very similar rate. So,
Hmm.
it's very interesting how different our milk can also be.
Well, and just the girl and the boy. Like, there's a completely different
Mm,
scale for
true.
Axel than there
Yeah.
was for Eleanor. And it was just weird to me. Like, I just assumed they'd grow. But I guess
Yes.
men and female are very different.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, it was very interesting. And I don't remember having, like, I remember having like a thin, very, very thin layer of fat on the top of my milk when it was in the fridge, but I know we would send pictures all the time and it
Mhm.
was not the same as yours. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's very interesting. It's very weird. It would also be weird like when I would pump how different in color the
Oh,
milk
yeah, the
could be
milk,
sometimes.
depending on what you did eat or drink.
Yeah, or like if you were sick or and just how your body kind of adapts to all of that and produces for your baby. It's pretty cool. I thought it was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I want to touch on too, Megan, some of just like the tips and things that helped us throughout our journey. Um, and one thing that is just really sticking in my mind that my sister had mentioned, with her breastfeeding journey, and I feel like is something that people should know, and it's helpful. Um, is that when she had the baby, she brought the baby out, and the nurse told her to just hold the baby near the breast and let the baby find the nipple. Where, we're always taught to kind of like hold the
Hmm.
boob and let the latch the baby. And so my sister held the baby there, and she had just like kind of, looked around, moved around a little bit, and she just immediately latched on once she found it. And the nurse was saying that the babies know where the milk is, the smell of their mom, and they know how
Hmm.
to find it. So if you let them find it, it'll help with like the latch and just that connection.
Yeah.
So that worked out really well for her. And that's something that I did not know at all.
I didn't know that either. Yeah, how they explained it to me is that I needed to like kind of forcefully
Mhm.
enter my nipple into her mouth for her to like recognize that it was there. That's very interesting, and I'll have to consider that next time I'm going through the process. I think for me, I struggled with like my body type in breastfeeding because I know there's a lot of body differences and people talk about the best positions, and I really think it's just what's best for your body type. For me, like I have larger breasts to the point where like feeding her, I can't necessarily just hold her like cradle in my arms and feed her from the breast because my breast is too big. My arm isn't long enough. It's like I would have to hold her lower, and I couldn't comfortably do that in one arm and do the thing where they're telling me to maneuver the breast into her mouth. And so, truly, the only position that worked for me was football.
What is the football? It's
The football's the one where you kind of like have the legs tucked under your armpit in a way, and you're kind of holding them lower into your breast. So that was the only way I could
and you're
get it
holding
to
them with
work.
your one arm, right? Yeah.
Yeah. hmm So for me to be able to comfortably do that, and like even at home, like sitting in our rocker to do it on the bed, like I was, a lot of people can like, oh, I can just breastfeed in public. That was really never an option for me because the way I had to like hold her comfortably was it took a lot of like effort. And so I never even thought like about my body and how that would affect my ability to breastfeed,
Hmm.
especially being somebody with larger breasts. I'm also like, I have more weight on me in general. So it was just different. It was just a different experience. Whereas, like, I just expected to be able to, like, cutely hold my baby and have
Like,
my
here.
boob in her mouth. But it did not work like that for me. And that's what I also think our breastfeeding journey or nursing journey really struggled because it wasn't, they were always like, oh, make sure you're comfortable. But like, it was really hard for me to be comfortable and also be in a position where she could nurse. So that was difficult.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about that. Nobody said anything like that to me.
And one of the things Austin always, like, it was so funny because the consultant would always be like, bring the baby to your boob and not the boob to your baby. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I would always be like trying to latch Axel like hunched over like this, and
Uh-huh.
Austin would just like quietly put his arm and push my body back. And I was like, "Okay, babe, I get it.
hmm
I'm just like my arms and my boobs, like it just didn't like sit perfectly where I could sit back and just like hold the baby and
Yeah.
latch it. So I
hmm
had to like adjust and then go back. So
hmm
that's another thing that I didn't know or think about, and he always reminded me of that.
Did you try side laying?
Yes, that was the only way I could do it. The football I couldn't really do just with how my arm is and how small
Mhm.
I am. Like my boob wasn't big enough to go
Yes.
in that area. So the sideline was really all that would work. And it was hard because I had to hold him up and hold my boob kind of in the position for him. And I don't, that was just really hard.
Yeah.
But that was the easiest way I could do it. So like when I did have to do it in public, like it worked out. I could just like lift my shirt up, put him under.
Well, isn't that cradle? Are you talking about cradle or are you talking about
Maybe
reverse
it's cradle.
cradle? I think you're because side laying is when like you're
Oh,
on.
no, I
Oh,
did not try that. I tried
okay.
cradle. Cradle
Yeah.
only worked for me.
Yeah, cradle I feel like that's one that I wish I would have been able to do because I think it would have been easier for me to do it in more public places.
Yeah. But the side laying one, did you do that?
I never did it. I don't want to say I was necessarily nervous to like do it, but you're sleepy, right? And I was always afraid I was going to like fall asleep and crush her.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of people. while nursing and after, talk about how that was the most comfortable for them. And I think I would probably try it next time.
Yeah, I've heard it was nice at night because you don't have to like get up, you don't really disturb the baby, you bring them in, you
Hmm.
lay down, but that was very hard for me mentally to be like, okay, no, like I'm gonna lay down, try to feed him, and be half asleep. I just like I
Hmm.
didn't want to take any risks and like fall asleep. Maybe at like 5, 6 months, that would have
Yeah.
been easier for me to try,
Hmm.
but like newborn stage, no.
Yeah, so much for me, so much anxiety during the newborn stage. I was just always afraid something was going to happen. And so I was probably overcautious in a lot of areas. Probably hindered myself from like trying some things, but it worked out for us long term.
And Megan, too, like one of the other things that you, I guess, inspired me was having all of the different like pump parts. Like you had
Hmm.
pump parts for all of your pumps throughout the day, so you weren't like constantly worried about doing dishes.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that was a good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I was pumping every 3 hours and I had so much fatigue from dishes. My hands were raw.
Hmm. Mine
Like,
too. That was bad.
and I was to the point where I'm like, mentally, I cannot keep pumping if I have to wash these pump parts literally every 3 hours. So, what I did is I bought in bulk the bottles. I also bought in bulk flanges.
And then the duck bills.
Yep, and I bought in bulk the duck bills as well, so that I had enough for the day. So that at the end of the day, we could just throw everything into the dishwasher and it would be good to go the next day. Oh, of course, I had enough for overnight as well. So that honestly like saved my pumping journey in a way, and also the Zomi pump
Hmm.
saved my pumping journey because I could not be tied to the wall.
Yeah, you and I went through like multiple pumps. Like
Lots of
we
pumps.
should
It's
do
embarrassing.
pump review
We do.
podcast.
Let's do it. We'll do. So we won't talk about it here because we between us both had our fair share of pumps.
Yes, we should do that. I think just finishing off on the pump piece, another tip was we really liked like the Spectra with the Zoomy, like, but those parts are where they stick out. They're not enclosed. It's not hidden.
Mhm.
And so I think the only two I remember off the top of my head right now are the Bella Baby and the Mom Cozy M5. Um, and those were ones where you could put in and
Mhm.
wear a shirt over, walk around. People, I mean, obviously it looks big, but they don't really know that you're pumping. And so that was a saver, like when you were out and about throughout the day, like in the car, if you were driving somewhere, you could pump, or like having guests over and you didn't want to go sit in the room for 30 minutes, then I just used those. And
Mhm.
I think that was helpful to kind of just continue life as normal.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to backtrack a minute because I want to talk about something that I didn't know going into breastfeeding and pumping, and that is the letdown. Did you
Oh,
know anything about that?
no. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So essentially, what happens when you're nursing or pumping is you're kind of like priming your breast to produce the milk. And when your breast starts releasing the milk, that is called a letdown. And you can have multiple letdowns during a session of nursing or pumping. Some women can feel it and some women can't. I was in the like gray area where I for a long time didn't feel anything. I would say closer to the end of my journey, I could feel like a little tingle. Did you feel yours?
I didn't really feel it in the beginning.
Mhm.
And then around like probably a month or two, I started to really feel it. I just remember one time I took Exo off and it was just like squirting everywhere. Um, 'Cause I was like trying to latch him at that point, but my letdown was coming out.
Mhm.
But I did feel my letdown. It kind of feels like a burning, tingling sensation, like you said, for me. And towards the end, it wasn't as strong. And I remember a few times where I would like be trying to pump and I like couldn't get to feel my letdown. And so I
Mhm.
would get very frustrated because I knew as soon as the letdown came, then you could
Yep.
keep pumping and get the milk out. So,
Yeah, and it's interesting because you want to learn that about your body, especially if you are pumping because there's settings on your pump that can facilitate, so they have like massage modes, at least most. I don't I don't know if all
most of them
pumps
do.
have this. I think most do. Yeah, but a lot of them have massage modes, so it kind of imitates the baby kind of suckling. They're like sucking, but they're not swallowing. So they're kind of like massaging the nipple with their mouth in a way to like get the letdown to happen. And so it's trying to imitate that. And then you have the actual, I don't know if it's called pump, but you have the actual like pump phase where you would change your pump and it would like pull. So it's like pulling
The
the
milk.
actual milk out.
Yeah.
And for me, it took me a while to like learn the best method to get the most milk production or to like imitate nursing for myself.
Yeah. There is like full like programs people follow for like 20 minutes where it's like 2 minutes on this mode, 3 minutes on this mode, 15 minutes on this mode. And
Hmm.
I think you had showed me that, and I really learned a lot about it too with the Medela, the hand pump, because
Hmm.
at the top you press to like the
Hmm.
suckling, and
Massage, yeah.
then
Hmm.
you like pull it out with the other. I'm like trying to like imitate it right now. You pull it out with the other handle, and so that was just like an easier understanding for me to understand. Okay, it's like the baby
Hmm.
is sucking kind of like as if they would use you as like a pacifier too, and then once they're really drinking, it's those stronger pulls. Once.
Yeah. I think another thing that's interesting that I didn't know about is when you are having a letdown, especially I would say specifically to nursing, when you are having a letdown, your other boob will also let down at the same time. I don't know how it varies between woman to woman, but mine was to the point where I would have to put a lot of times I use the haka, which I didn't prefer. I found one which I can't remember the brand name, but I found one was that had the very similar suction that would like sit in my bra.
Mm,
That was more like
yeah,
circular.
yeah, it's like the cups. Like I
The
put it in,
cups,
and I would wear
yes.
them all the time. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The cups. I think that's a good way to put it. So I used that one a lot because it was just much more comfortable. And with the baby moving around, the haka always got knocked off. You know how many
Always,
times I
always.
spilt that
I
dang
never
thing?
used it. Yeah, because every
Yeah.
time I would try to, it would fall off.
Or I had to suction it so hard where it like hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but yeah, that's honestly, my sister-in-law had said, "Oh, I suggest the haka for your letdown," but I didn't know what that meant. So I had bought one, but I didn't know it
You
didn't.
didn't know when to use it or what
I'm
to
like,
use.
what is this thing? um,
Tahanka makes like little ladybug covers too, they or
hmm.
cups, which I
Yeah,
don't know, but the cheap plastic ones work fine too.
yeah, yeah. They're all the same, I would say, for the most part. You just have to figure out what's best for your body and also for your bank.
Did you leak a lot during the day though?
I did not. It really depend now that I'm thinking back to it. I would leak if it got close to like the 3-hour mark and I hadn't started yet.
Yeah, yeah, I leaked all the time. I was leaking like during the day. I would have those plastic covers on, and probably before I would even go to pump the next time,
Hmm.
within like the 2 3 hour mark, I would be dumping out an ounce of milk.
Wow.
Not like dumping it
Yeah.
out, but I would save it, because I
Yes.
could tell when it was full. Um, and then at night, I would leak so bad that I would try to wear those, but they would leak because there's like the pour out at the top,
Hmm.
and so I probably would go back and use the soft pads, the
Hmm.
reusable ones, and at night, because like my whole shirt would be soaking, like everything
Oh
would be
my
soaking wet
gosh.
at night. So, yeah, but that is helpful. So if you do leak during the day, to use those plastic covers and just make
Hmm.
sure you're dumping them like within an hour or two because you don't want the milk to go bad. But
Yeah.
as long as you put it in the fridge, you're collecting an extra ounce or 2 ounces every day.
Yeah, no, I didn't like that much. And it's probably honestly our bodies, you being more of an overproducer, your body was just kind of like constantly producing where mine was just
Hmm.
chilling.
Yeah. And that hurt. I mean, I everyone's like, "Oh, I would love to be an overproducer," but it is uncomfortable. It hurts.
I
And
did want to talk about that too. Like, did you have um what do they call milk clots? What did they call
milk,
that?
milk clogs instead of
Clogs.
clogs.
Yes. Did you get any clogs?
I did not get like major ones, but I would see little ones sometimes in the milk.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things like people told me is to always like feel if you feel like hard spots. So I would get a lot of hard spots where I would think it would
Mhm.
be a clog, but by the time it came out, I didn't really notice it in the milk. So I used a lot of ice packs on my boobs in the beginning because they just burned and hurt so bad. Um, and so the ice pack really helps because it lowers inflammation. You would think that a heating pad would help, and so like those massagers and the heating pads is what they say to use, but the ice pack helped a lot. And then I would massage if I really felt like I needed to. One thing that was a lifesaver for me though was the sunflower lecithin from those. I don't know the brand.
I think it's legendary milk, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was like once I started taking that, um, my milk production just helped because it didn't like get clogged in my breasts a lot. So as an overproducer, one of the things that they told me during breastfeeding that would be helpful for your baby, because sometimes your letdowns can be really strong when you're an overproducer for your baby. And so they would tell me to just take like three fingers and put them at the top of your breast as your letdown's coming to like help slow the letdown so your baby isn't like
Oh,
choking and like, having like a whole flood of
interesting.
milk come on them. So
That made me think to like, did you have to massage for your letdown? Because I always had to massage my breasts.
only when they were like, I could feel like harder parts, I would
Mhm.
massage, or like potential milk clogs. I did not have to massage like as often as you said you did
Mhm.
for your letdown. I did not.
Yeah. I had a massage like almost the whole pumping session. I had to work for my milk. um Back to the milk clogs, I never had a clog. I had like twice where I thought maybe I could have had one because there were like areas of pain in a way. Like it wasn't an overpowering feel of pain, but it was like present. I have a hard time explaining pain. Everyone's like, when you go to the doctors and they're like, does it ache or does it pull? And I'm like, I don't know.
It's in pain.
Both? So, but I would have like these small areas. So I did buy the legendary milk sunflower lecithin or whatever it's called. I never had to open it or use it. I never got mastitis. I never had to ice my breasts. Even when I was weaning off, I would just drop a pump like every day, and I really didn't have any issues.
The sunflower lecithin, I researched it, and I think it also just helps like keep your milk flowing in general outside of just the like helping with milk clogs. So I guess I'd have to go back and look at it again because it was a while ago. But
Yeah,
I think that also helps just kind of keeping your production like, I don't want to say normal, but like
yeah,
flowing.
yeah. One thing I remember that just popped in my head was always trying to eat certain foods and drink certain drinks to like increase my production. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
We like swore by the what were those drinks?
Body armors.
Body armors.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anything worked for me, to be honest. Like Oreos were thrown out all the time. Those
Lactation
drinks,
cookies.
the cookies. I tried all these things. They didn't seem to do anything different for me. I stuck with the drinks because I liked them, but
Yeah.
I don't know that any of it really affected me.
I think the body armors helped because it helps keep you hydrated, right? If you think of only drinking water, it's not giving you all the nutrients and the minerals that you need in most of our water, our tap water, everything, unless you're really drinking like fully filtered or not filtered spring water. So you're not getting what you need anyway. And I think the body armors had some of that in there. But again, I don't know how good they are for you,
Yeah,
but they taste good. And
they do.
I just found like eating, keeping hydrated,
Latching,
protein, yeah, latching,
skin to skin.
skin to skin was a big one. They always talked
Hmm.
about skin to skin. And I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt this way because it was February when my baby was born. It was cold. In the Midwest, it's cold. And so my baby was bundled up, wrapped up in clothes all the time. And so to me, to just sit there and skin to skin was not something I wanted to do in the freezing cold unless I was
Yes.
sitting in front of a heater. And I think that that is something I would go back and redo. I would
Hmm.
probably do a lot more skin to skin because at the age of 1 now, they're not like, there's no like skin to skin unless you're putting them in the bathtub before their bath.
I agree with you. I feel like I did a lot of skin to skin. I feel like I could have done more. It felt like a chore to undress them, and dressing them and undressing them wasn't always easy. This is something I'm going to change with the next baby. Maybe. I already have so many clothes of girls, so if my next girl,
She has
baby's a
plans.
girl. Yeah. But I would have preferred just zippies. Like I should
Mhm.
have just for the first like 3 months just done zippies cuz like truly getting the onesie over their little wobbly heads is a nightmare.
Yeah. And like changing, taking,
Blowouts.
dressing them for like feeding. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So I would have changed that and maybe it would have been a little easier to consider doing more skin to skin if I could just like zip the baby's clothes on and off, but that wasn't the case for us. Yeah.
Zippies are the way to go. And then now at age 1, it's so hard to like hold them still to button the onesies. Like we just wear a t-shirt and pants every day.
Yeah.
I know we covered a lot, and I really think we should share all of our pumping tips and
Hmm.
reviews in another episode. But I think we should talk about what mom era we're in this week and wrap this up.
Yeah, let's do it. I would say my mom era, it extends longer than this week. I'm in the mom bun
Mom
era.
bun era. Ooh,
I don't want to do my hair ever.
it's so much work.
I know today for the podcast because I knew we were recording. I'm like, do I want to like do my hair? And I'm like, nope, it's mom bun era
Mom bun
today.
era. I'm in mom growing hair out era, so I am in my mom era of an eating toddler. We love to eat anything and everything, but also we're starting to get picky with what we're eating.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, like the other day, we gave him like rice, avocado, and I don't know, lunch meat or something else for lunch. And the lunch meat was all we ate. The rice and avocado we no longer like. We no longer like eating a pouch from the pouch. We want the pouch in a bowl with a spoon.
Axel knows what he wants.
Yeah, if we already ate before we went to a restaurant, we still want to eat everything at the restaurant. And we want to eat what mom and dad are eating.
Of course.
And then lastly, the other thing he does is if we don't like something now or we're done eating, we just start pulling it out of our mouth. So, like, for example, applesauce, we gave it to him. He puts it in his mouth, he'll take a bite of it, and then he'll just pull it right out. Um,
Oh no. So it's like dribbling down his
yeah,
chin.
just in his hand, just pulling it out. But yeah, anything else, if he's just done, he just starts pulling it out. Hmm.
Does he, because this is Eleanor's thing when she's done, one, she'll take her hand and like wipe it over her tray. And
Oh,
so the
yeah.
food's flying. And then she'll also take her food in her hand and just literally drop it off the side onto the
Yes.
floor.
Yes. He'll take it, he'll look at you, and he'll throw it down and he'll look back and go, like for uh-oh, because he
Uh
just says,
oh.
and
Hmm.
yeah, then drop it again and go, ah. Okay, we're done. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. Probably, well, we hope it was helpful. It's all the tips and tricks and things that we didn't know going into breastfeeding and pumping. And it can be a scary time because it's something that everyone talks about and I guess makes such a big deal when you're going into being
Hmm.
a mother. And there's so many other things going on outside of just feeding your baby. And having that resource or other people that are in the same boat is helpful. If you have any questions about our experiences or want to share any of your experiences or tips and tricks that helped you, feel free to message us on Instagram or TikTok or email us at momerapodcast@gmail.com. All right. See you
Okay.
later. Bye.
Bye.